Welcome back to another episode of Tea After Midnight. Just a little series where we have some tea to keep it nice and classy, but I also tell you scary stories. Tonight's story definitely has me super unsettled, so with that being said, let's jump right in. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary Appalachian story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. But before I get into tonight's story, I wanted to show you guys what I found because I feel like this fits Tea After Midnight perfectly. This is her. Look how stinking cute she is. Little ghost for some spookiness, but she also has a cute little pink bow. I mean, come on. I definitely think she needs to be our new mascot, so you guys let me know in the comments what you think we should name her. Now let's jump right into tonight's story. This story comes from Caitlin. As a child, my family lived in Rhode Island. However, we did have some family in the Appalachian Mountains. Most of the time, they would come and visit us as there was more to do here, and they lived in the middle of nowhere. But one summer, they asked if we wanted to come and stay with them. My mother, my father, my two older brothers, and I packed up and headed their way. As we got closer to their house, I noticed there was really nothing out there. We had to drive through around 10 minutes of nothing but pure woods to reach their house. The first night there was normal. It was filled with laughter, board games, and s'mores between my cousins and my siblings. However, on the second day, my aunt, uncle, and parents went grocery shopping. My cousins and brothers decided they wanted to go outside and explore in the woods. I was no stranger to the Appalachian stories, and while I didn't quite believe they were true, 12-year-old me was stuck on the what if. So I decided to stay in. They had only been gone for a few minutes when I heard my mom call my name. It sounded so much like her, even using my nickname. "Katie Cat, come here," it repeated twice. I was confused as the store they were going to was 30 minutes away by itself, and my parents had not been gone that long. I yelled back asking if she had forgotten something, with no response. Whatever that was repeated it in a deeper voice using my name this time. "Caitlin, I said come here." It followed with a distorted laughter that made my stomach turn. It no longer sounded anything like my mom. I locked the door of the guest room that I was staying in and tried to forget about it. I didn't leave that room until my cousins and brothers were back. When I told them the story, they laughed at me and told me to stop making things up. I wondered if I really had imagined the whole thing, if I'm being honest. The rest of the day went very smoothly and I had a lot of fun. Just as I began to forget about that night, we decided to have another bonfire and make s'mores again. Everyone stayed out there for around an hour and a half and then headed in to get ready for bed. Only me, one of my brothers Carson, and one of my cousins Zoe stayed outside. I got this uneasy feeling, almost as if we were being watched. The house was about 20 feet behind us up a hill and everything else was just woods. I began looking around until my eyes landed on something. I could see nothing but its eyes, big, round, yellow eyes. I tried to tell myself that it could just be an animal, but deep inside, I knew. The eyes were looking directly at us, not moving. And then it stepped out into the light. A tall, gray, scaly creature on all fours with those same yellow eyes. Zoe turned around too. None of us said anything. We were frozen in fear. My brother scooped me into his arms and told Zoe to run. He carried me up that hill and right into the house, but Zoe wasn't behind us. We turned around looking for her, but we couldn't see over the hill from the window, and we sure weren't going back outside. We slightly opened the door and called out to her. "Zoe, where are you? Are you coming? Are you okay, Zoe?" But there wasn't a response. Around 2 to 3 minutes later, she comes calmly walking up the hill, as if she had never seen anything. She walks into the house and tells us she's going to get ready for bed. My brother started eagerly asking questions, if it had come closer, why she didn't run with us, and if she knew what that thing was. She looked at us confused and told us that she didn't know what creature we were talking about. She walked upstairs and my brother and I looked at each other completely confused. The next day we tried to ask her about it again, and she got aggravated and yelled at us to stop. My brother even thought that she was the creature, that it somehow replaced her. I began to believe that too, because nothing else strange happened the entire trip. Except for Zoe. She was acting very strange. Always wanting to go outside, but never wanting anyone to go out with her. She used to constantly want to hang out with everyone, but suddenly she wanted to be all alone all the time. She wasn't eating much either. She never told us what happened that night, no matter how many times we asked. She said she didn't know why we kept making up a creature that was never there. The next summer, when everyone came to visit us again, Zoe didn't come. My aunt and uncle told us that Zoe really liked home and preferred to stay there. She never came back to Rhode Island. She never wanted to leave her home. To this day, she doesn't travel, and she still goes on walks alone in the woods. We've asked her about it many more times, but she will never admit whatever happened that day. So like I said, this one has really unsettled me, and there's definitely a lot to unpack here. So I'll just start with, you're in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, in the middle of nowhere, and your family goes out to go grocery shopping. Your brothers and cousins are outside of the house, so you're in the house by yourself, and you hear what sounds like your mom calling out to you. But not only does it call out to you, it calls you by your nickname. That creeps me out so bad. But then it follows up with a distorted laugh, and that just unsettles me beyond words can describe. But after all that happened, you try to forget about it. That night you go outside, you're with your brother and your cousin, y'all are all sitting around the fire, and you feel like something's watching you. And I'm gonna say this, if you feel like something is watching you, more than likely there is. And your intuition was right, because you lock eyes with something, yellow glowing eyes. I don't even know what that is, because you described it here, a tall, gray, scaly creature on all fours with those same yellow eyes. I don't even know what that is. If anybody has any idea what that is, please let us know, because that is terrifying. But after all of you saw it, you and your brother are running back inside, but you don't see Zoe. She's not behind you, so you start calling out, trying to find out where Zoe's at. And then a few minutes later, she just calmly walks in like she didn't just see the most terrifying creature that she's ever seen in her life. Definitely weird. And as I was reading this, just the way you were describing how Zoe was acting after that encounter, I almost did think, okay, maybe this creature has like swapped places, because obviously we have a mimic around because it's mimicking the sound of people around you. So I'm like, well, maybe it's a mimic. But then I'm like, what's the purpose of it doing that and swapping places with Zoe if its goal was to not do anything? You know what I mean? So I really don't know what all of this could be. I definitely know that the first thing that you encountered was a mimic. I mean, there's no other way to explain that. It was mimicking the sound of someone else in the home. And that's just utterly terrifying, because again, you're supposed to be in a safe environment inside of your house or in your aunt and uncle's house, and you have an encounter like that inside your house. That's terrifying in and of itself. But then this creature that you see, I have no idea what that is. A gray, scaly, like, creature with yellow glowing eyes. I've never even heard that. Like, I genuinely don't know what that is. So if anybody in the comments has any idea what this could have been, please let us know. But Caitlin, thank you so much for sending in your story. I really hate that you guys went through that, and I'm actually curious to know, like, how Zoe is doing today, because it sounds like there was no resolve to that. She just wants to stay at home all the time. She never comes and visits. She just wants to stay at home all the time, and taking walks outside alone in the woods, that just freaks me out, and I just wish I knew what happened to her when she was out there and you guys had run back inside. So if you do ever find out and you want to let us know, please send me an email. I would love a follow-up on this for sure. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. As always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I love you so much. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
So I used to do house calls in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, sometimes in areas so desolate that my patients did not even have running water or electricity. I would be navigating to their homes with the use of a map and a compass in my car, because I didn't even have cell service to use GPS. And that's how I started off doing house calls. The company I used to work for doesn't exist anymore. It's gone, it's been dissolved, but I still do house calls, right? And most of the time I'm in the city. But today I was in like a super rural, like Amish country town. And I'm doing a visit on an Englishman, right? But his neighbors are Amish, okay? And, oh, wait, all of my stories are changed for the sake of HIPAA and for the sake of storytelling. Because the last thing I want is to end up in like jail or nurse jail for HIPAA, okay? So I will have to change some of the minor details. But anyways, I'm seeing this patient and it's an English person, right? But the neighbors are Amish. And I noticed the neighbors have draft horses and I have draft horses. If you didn't know that, you might have seen some of my horse content here or there, okay? But anywho, I see his draft horses are out. And before I leave the property after doing this visit, I like pop my head over to like where he is on the very edge of his property near my patient's property. And I was like, hey, I happen to notice this particular type of harness you have on your horse. I really like the style of it. Is it synthetic? Is it leather? Like, what is it? So we get to talking a little bit. His kids are outside. So cute. I think his wife is like in the back, like doing something in the garden. They were the nicest people. But anywho, he tells me what tack shop he gets it from. And he mentions, I actually have to go into town with my wife and my kids for something like down the road. He's like, I don't have an address, but I can take you and show you where this tack shop is if it's on your route. And so he's describing to me where it is, and I'm like, I actually have to go in that direction anyways. And he goes, great, just I have to make one stop, but then I will show you where the tack shop is. And I'm like, I truly don't want to be an inconvenience. Like, I'm not here to be a bother. I was just wondering, like, the craftsmanship on that is beautiful. And like, really, if you've never seen Amish made horse tack, like, it's just unparalleled, okay? It's just, chef's kiss, beautiful. And the prices, don't get me started. And the produce in the area and the bakery in the area, but hang on, that's not the point. So he's like, okay, well, follow me. He's got his horse hooked up, not the draft horse. He's got his little street horse hooked up. It looked like a standard bred, right? And he's got his kids and his wife in the buggy. And he's like, follow me. And so I'm driving down the road at like 10 miles an hour, following this little horse and buggy. And I'm like, this guy I just met 2 seconds ago in the middle of nowhere was like, hey girl, follow my buggy. I'll show you where the good horse stuff is. And I was just like, okay, I'll go to like this random other Amish guy's house that sells tack, like, and I'll make a stop with you on the way. I'm being kidnapped at like 8 miles an hour. I didn't care where we were going as long as they had the good horse stuff. So I follow him, and like I said, he did say he had to make a stop. So we make a stop at the first place. It's like a residential property. Like, we drive like a quarter mile off the road and end up at this beautiful farmhouse, and like there's a market in the basement, I guess. So I park and I'm like, I'm gonna stay in my car because I don't know these people. Like, I'm not just gonna get out and wander around near their house. Well, then someone comes and knocks on my window and they're like, oh, like, do you wanna come in? We have like a produce market. Like, we have some donuts. We usually only sell them on Wednesdays, but like, I'll give you a donut. And I was like, no, it's totally fine. Like, I am not trying to be a bother. 10 minutes later, I am in the basement of a stranger's house in the middle of Amish country. No cell service, no nothing. Followed this random family there. Followed their horse and buggy there, and they just gave me a donut in their basement. And I'm just eating it, like, with all the little Amish kids. While the Amish people talk. I was like, no one will ever find me. I just followed these people because they said there was horse stuff. And I was like, say less. I'm in. The donut, unreal. The Amish ladies, so nice, right? I was sad I have to leave. We stayed there for like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. I had my donut with the kids. And then I get back in my truck and I follow the buggy and they take me to this tack shop that I would have never known was a tack shop. Did not look like a horse or tack shop whatsoever. You would not believe the stuff they have in that shop. The amount of bits they have, size 6 and up, the size of the halters they have, the size of like the actual bridles they have, Western, not English. But he did say He's like, oh, I know a guy who makes the bridles for me that might be able to fashion you an English bridle in brown. I'm like, you guys know what all the good stuff is. So for all the times that I worry about all the strange things that happen to me and like the risks associated with my job, like I really will just go on side quests with strangers. I have to go back tomorrow to take Cash up to the saddlery shop, like the tack shop, because obviously they don't take Apple Pay. And I can't believe some of the products that they have. So the moral of the story is, you probably could kidnap me if you told me there was a nice saddle somewhere. Amish bakery is my jam. And I didn't mean to leave TikTok. I just got really, really busy. Very busy. If you can't tell, guys, I look very different. I've been on a personal care journey here. Anyways.
This ghost scared my friend so bad that she refused to be alone at my house. Story time. So growing up, I had this best friend named Brittany, and me and her did everything together. We were very close. For years, we would stay at each other's houses back and forth. She saw some of the hauntings at my house and at Grandma's house. For the most part, she would ignore it. She didn't even want to talk about it. She did not like scary stuff, ghost talk, none of that. So she would just act like nothing happened. So one night, we're sitting on the living room floor watching TV when all of a sudden, we see this big shadow go across the wall. And I said, "Did you see that?" She said, "No, just ignore it. Remember, if you give it attention, it feeds off that. We have to ignore it." So we did. A few minutes later, we see that shadow again, and I said, "I don't think ignoring it works." She said, "Just keep ignoring it." Sometime later that night, I wake up to her screaming. She tells me that she got hungry because she had diabetes. She was always eating and drinking something, so she went to the refrigerator while I was asleep on the couch. She was standing in the refrigerator door, digging through stuff, when she felt this cold chill behind her. She thought it was me at first, just because it felt like somebody was standing there. Then she felt someone playing with her hair, so she thought I was standing there braiding her hair while she was looking in the refrigerator. She stands there for a good 2 or 3 minutes and says, "Are you done? I'm gonna get this cheese out," but I don't reply. So she turns around, and that's when she sees it. It's not me. She and this thing were face to face. She said this thing looked like an elderly woman whose jaw had been taken off. It was just her top face and her top row of teeth. She had these big white bulging eyes that were like popping out of the sockets, and long gray hair. Within a flash, it was gone. She got so scared she threw the remote in the fridge, slammed the door, and ran back to the couch where I was asleep. I was knocked out on the couch. She could barely wake me up. Back then, when a friend stayed with me, I would sleep really hard because I would be more comfortable and feel safe. But while she was trying to wake me up, she looks over at our kitchen table. She saw it crouched down under the table staring at her. She starts hitting me like, "Wake up, get up." And then I do, and she said, "Look, look." But by the time I look, it's gone. A few days later, we finally tell her mom what we saw. They had hauntings at their house too, but not as bad as our families. Her mom told us that way back in the day, there was an older woman who her husband blanked her in the face with a shotgun. It was nothing but the top row of teeth and the top part of her head left. Everything on the bottom was gone. And because of the impact, it made her eyes bulge out of the skull. I said, "That's exactly what she's describing. I wonder if it's that woman." Her mom made up these little sage bags and had us take them back to the house. We tried to cleanse the place, and when I tell you them sage bags did nothing, like I said, at our house, Bibles, sage, crystals, all that would do was piss these spirits off. And honestly, I think sometimes that stuff made them stronger. Maybe they fed off of it, got strength or energy from it. I don't know, but it got a lot worse. Another time, her mom got off work and was going to stop by and cleanse our house, but before she got there, she got in a bad car wreck and nearly died. She saw in the rearview mirror someone was sitting in the back seat. She said when she turned on our road, something snatched a wheel out of her hand and she lost control. And my mom wrecked almost in the same place, and she also said it felt like someone snatched a wheel out of her hand.
A funeral home called to tell me that my mother had died, but my actual mother was sitting beside me the entire time when I answered. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about the dead woman who claimed that I belonged to her. I was at my mom's house when the call came in. We were sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end asked if she was speaking to me, using my full name. And then she said she was calling from a funeral home. She told me she was sorry for my loss and asked where I would be available to discuss arrangements for my mother. I looked across the table at my mom, and she was holding her coffee mug and staring back at me. I told the woman there had to have been a mistake. She repeated my name and then read out my date of birth and phone number. Everything was correct. She said the woman who had died listed me as her only daughter and emergency contact. I asked for the woman's name. I had never heard it before, and my mom was watching my face, so I put the call on speaker. The funeral home employee explained that the woman had died alone at home, and there wasn't much family information on file, but my details were clearly written in several places. I told her my mother was alive and sitting right beside me, and there was a long pause. And then she asked if I could come identify the body just to help them figure out what had happened. My mom immediately said no. She told me it sounded like some kind of scam and that I shouldn't give them any information. But the employee already knew my full name, birthday, phone number, and the address at the house where I grew up. The last part was what made me go. My mom refused to come with me. She kept saying there was no reason to involve ourselves, but she seemed more frightened than suspicious. At the funeral home, they showed me a photograph instead of taking me directly to the body. The woman looked like she was probably in her late 60s. Dark gray hair and a thin face, completely unfamiliar. I told them I had never seen her before. The employee looked confused. She showed me a form the woman had filled out a few years earlier. Under next of kin, my name was written in blue ink. Under relationship, she had written daughter. My childhood address was listed beneath it. They gave me a small bag of belongings found in the woman's house because everything inside had my name on it. There was no jewelry or money, just an envelope and an old house key. The envelope had a name written across the front. It was something my family called me when I was little. I hadn't used it since elementary school, and almost no one outside my family knew it. Inside were photographs of me. The first few were normal school pictures, the kindergarten photo, second grade, one from middle school. I assumed they had been copied from yearbooks or taken from social media. And then I reached the photos that weren't posed. There was one of me playing on the swings at an elementary school, taken from behind a fence. One showed me sitting inside my childhood bedroom, and the picture had been taken from outside the window. There were photos of me walking into my first apartment, getting my car outside of work, and carrying groceries into my current house. The newest one had been taken 6 days earlier. I was standing in my kitchen with my back to the window. I left the funeral home and drove directly to my mom's house. She was still at the kitchen table when I got there, and I put the pictures down in front of her. She looked through them quickly until she reached the photograph of the dead woman, and then she stopped. I asked if she recognized her, and my mom said no, but she wouldn't look at me when she said it. I kept asking until she finally admitted that she had seen the woman once. When I was around 4, I started talking about someone I called my other mommy. My parents assumed she was an imaginary friend. I told them the woman came to my bedroom window at night and asked me to go outside with her. My mom said I described her as having dark hair and a long face. One night, she heard me talking in my bedroom and went upstairs. I was standing on my bed with the window open, and there was a woman outside in the yard. My mom screamed, and the woman ran. They called the police, but no one found her. After that, my parents moved me into another bedroom and put locks on every window. Eventually, I stopped talking about the other mommy. I didn't remember any of it. I asked why my mom had denied recognizing her picture. She said she wasn't completely sure it was the same woman. It had been more than 20 years, and she had only seen her from the upstairs window. But she said the face looked the same, older but the same. I stayed at my mom's house until it started getting dark. When I left, she begged me not to go home alone, but I told her I would be fine. I checked every window and door when I got home. I closed the curtains and put the envelope of photographs in a kitchen drawer. Nothing happened for most of the night. And then sometime after 2, I heard someone outside my bedroom window. At first I thought it was an animal moving through the bushes, and then a woman whispered my childhood nickname. She said it softly, almost like she was trying not to wake anyone else. I stayed in bed, and she whispered it again. And then she said, "Come outside, Mommy's been waiting." I called my real mom and kept her on the phone until morning. The voice stayed outside my window for almost an hour, calling me by that nickname. I never looked through the curtain, and when the sun came up, it stopped. There was no one outside when I finally checked. I got rid of the photographs and stayed with my mom for a while after that. I still don't know who that woman was or why she had been following me since I was a child. I only know that she died believing or pretending that I was her daughter. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
This series of spooky stories, anonymous submission. I've listened to your TikTok channel for over a year now, and I love your content. I wanted to share a story of something that happened to me when I was 17 years old. My mom and stepdad used to be caretakers at the high school I went to as a teenager, which meant living in the custodial house that was on school ground. It was a small 2-story house with the main living area on the top floor along with the main bedroom and kitchen. My room was on the second floor or basement area along with the bathroom and laundry room. I didn't care much for being in the basement area because it stayed a little cold in the winter, and where the house was positioned next to a wooded area, we always got wood spiders in the house, and they loved my room, of course. Also, aside from the fact that it's a fucking basement, those are terrifying. But I did like having my own bathroom, so it was a pretty good setup. When I was a teen, I got into vampires. It's like a rite of passage. I loved any and all vampire movies like The Lost Boys, Dracula, the one with Gary Oldman, and of course, The Interview with the Vampire, the Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise one. Yes, I know I'm telling my age. Anyway, I ended up purchasing the book called Vampires Among Us, and I decided to be pretty open-minded about it because I thought, hey, things like that may exist. That probably wasn't a good idea considering what happened. I was laying in bed reading the book and probably read about 3 chapters before deciding to go to sleep. Now, my bed was positioned where the light switch was beside the head of my bed. I set the book down on my nightstand, reached, and just flipped the light switch off when I felt something jump onto my bed. I felt it run up the bed, and then it put its claw on my neck. Needless to say, I froze in terror and couldn't move. Whatever it was didn't do anything. It just stayed perfectly still with its claw on my neck. It was like almost having a knife to my throat because I wasn't sure what would happen if I moved. I finally jerked to cut the light back on, and as I did this, I felt the thing run back down my bed, and I heard it jump onto the floor. I lay there in bed with my light on, afraid to move. I didn't hear any movement, so I did eventually muster up the courage to look under my bed, but I didn't find anything. You're braver than me. I pulled the covers up around my neck and slept with the light on all night. The next morning, I threw that book in the trash and swore to never read anything like that again, but it didn't make a difference. I'm not sure if by reading that book or deciding to keep an open mind about it invited something into my home, but strange occurrences continued to happen. It was small things I began to notice at first. I would close my curtains at night and they would be open in the morning. I was constantly losing or misplacing stuff, which was probably normal for a teenager, but the items would always show up in places that I knew that I wouldn't have left them. One time I found my work badge under my bathroom sink, and I have never put it there because I always put it on my dresser. The scariest thing that happened was one day my stepdad and I were in the living room upstairs watching TV when all of a sudden something started beating on the living room floor. It literally felt like someone was taking their fist and pounding the floor underneath. My stepdad and I both looked at each other before he decided to go downstairs to see what it could be, but found nothing. I lived there with my mom and stepdad for a few more years before I eventually moved out. I did continue experiencing the curtain thing and the misplacing things, which I started contributing to being an absent-minded teenager. For my own mental health, I never encountered anything jumping on my bed or beating on the floor again, thank God. I still do like vampire movies and scary movies in general, but I've learned that you should always be aware of the things that you watch, read, and oftentimes can open up doors to things that you may or may not want to encounter. That is my scary story, and I hope that you liked it. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to hearing more of the Haunted Tea Spill. Sincerely, Amanda. On a scale of 1 to 10, spooky, scary, what do we rate it? 1 being the least spooky, scary, 10 being the most. If you have your own story that you want to submit to me to read, you can submit it to thehauntedteaspill@gmail.com. These stories don't have to be anonymous. She put Sincerely Amanda, and generally when people say they want to remain anonymous, I won't say their name. And you can specify that in your story. Some people don't want their information out there because they don't want people to know, people close to them, like, you know what I mean? In the series of anonymous petty events, it was absolutely anonymous because people would do crazy illegal shit, and those were anonymous for a reason, period. There was no like, yeah, say my name. No, I'm not saying your name. But these are obviously a little bit different, so be sure to put your preference. I know that people have been asking for a series of spooky stories like the submission, and this landed in my email a couple of days ago, so I thought that I would tell this one. I know that I did it a little bit different with the green screen, but these tend to do a little bit better, so see you at the next episode.
She saw a woman she didn't know walking down the hallway of her grandparents' house and then suddenly vanish. If you're new here, I'm Krista, and on my account I tell spooky stories either submitted to me or found on the internet. This story was submitted by Bree. This story happened a few years back. It's not so crazy, but very unexpected. I've only had one experience in my life that I genuinely can't explain. When I was younger, my grandparents' house had this hallway that everyone hated. It wasn't even that long, just narrow, unusually dark, and somehow always felt heavier than the rest of my house. Every person who came over would mention it eventually. Even during the day, it just felt really wrong. The hallway led straight to my grandparents' bedroom. Right before their room was a small bathroom. One day, I walked into the bathroom like I had 100 times before. Nothing felt unusual. I remember walking in and turning around to close the bathroom door behind me. And that's when I saw her, standing in the hallway, maybe a foot away from me. Close enough that if I had reached out, I probably could have touched her. She was wearing what looked like a black wedding dress. Not a modern one, something much older. The fabric looked dark and heavy, and a veil covered her entire face. I couldn't see any features, no eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just the outline of a woman behind the veil. The weirdest part is that she didn't seem to acknowledge me, and I wasn't scared. At least not at first. It was more like the feeling you get when your brain can't process what it's looking at. I just stood there for a second as she walked toward my grandparents' bedroom. I remember watching her take several steps down the hallway. She moved pretty normally. She wasn't floating or gliding. She was walking. Then she reached the doorway of the bedroom. The room beyond was dark, and she stepped into it. I followed her with my eyes the entire time. The second she crossed into the darkness, she was gone. I stood there waiting for her to come back out. She never did. I checked the room. No one was there. Just my grandparents' bedroom, exactly as it had always been. To this day, I've never seen her again. But what bothers me now isn't the woman. It's the fact that I didn't react. Almost like for those few seconds, seeing her felt completely normal. And sometimes I wonder why she was there. Maybe I just happened to be standing in the hallway when something passed through. It's really interesting that you weren't scared, and it makes me think whether or not this entity or whatever it is was in fact a good spirit just passing through. Because I feel like if it was something like a demon, you would have had like cold chills or like this feeling of dread, like something that would tell you that the entity was evil. And it really does sound like you caught a glimpse of something passing through into the afterlife, like you said. Very, very, very interesting. And Brie, if you're watching this, I'd be curious to know if your grandparents' house like has any history, and if you looked into it and saw whether or not someone matching this description has lived in the house prior. Thank you so much, Brie, for submitting this story. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
I still don't know what scares me more, what I saw or what I found afterward. About 6 months ago, I woke up at around 3 a.m. for no reason. The house was completely silent. I rolled over and looked toward my bedroom door and froze. There was a woman standing in the doorway. She was wearing a long red dress and a red veil that covered most of her face. I could only see her mouth, and she was smiling. Of course, because what's more terrifying than a grinning ghost in your house? The huge grin stretched across her face like she was just delighted that I'd noticed her. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I just stared at her. She didn't say anything, she didn't get any closer, she just stood there, grinning at me. After what felt like forever, I yanked the blanket over my head. I know that sounds ridiculous, but panic took over. I stayed there for what must have been 20 minutes before finally working up the courage to look again. But the doorway was empty. The next morning, I searched the house. The doors were locked, the windows were locked, no sign of anyone. For months, it continued. Always at night and always when I'd woken up from a deep sleep. I'd convinced myself it'd been a nightmare or sleep paralysis. Then last weekend, I was cleaning out a cupboard in the spare room. It's an old built-in cabinet that I'd honestly never looked through properly since moving in. And at the very back, stuffed behind some loose boards, I found a bundle of fabric, a red dress, and a matching veil. I just sat there staring at them. The previous owner had left over 30 years ago. The house had been stood empty ever since until I moved in, but these clothes looked new, not over 30 years old. I wanted to find proof that the woman I'd seen was a ghost, but the more I thought about it, the worse the reality became. Ghosts don't need to take their clothes off and hide them in cupboards. Someone wore that outfit. Someone was standing in my doorway. I spent months being terrified my house was haunted, and finding that dress should have made me feel better. Instead, it gave me an answer to my question. What could be more terrifying than a grinning ghost in your home? A real person.
Imagine you put your young child to bed. All is calm and quiet for quite some time, as it should be, until you hear what sounds like footsteps creaking overhead. Your child then bursts into tears so quickly you reach for the baby monitor in which you can hear these cries through, because luckily it also has a video playing on screen. What you see unsettles you to the very core and sends you running straight up to your child's bedroom. Well, this exactly happened to a family around 6 years ago, and I've been sent the images from the baby camera, which you can see here. How deeply unsettling. You can quite clearly see a figure, and it almost looks to me like you could make out the silhouette of a face from both the left and the right hand side, which is even more eerie. I think you'd agree with me. Well, this family was experiencing sporadic paranormal activity over a great deal of time that usually centered around the little one's bedroom. They never thought it to be sinister. In fact, they put it down to a visiting relative that was not long deceased, which in some ways for some people is rather comforting. It wouldn't necessarily be for me, but for some people I think it would be. Now, what do you make out from this image? And why did it cause the child to burst into tears when it visited them in their bedroom? I don't know about you, but if this ever appeared on, a baby monitor that I was watching, I would be really panicked, because it's one thing experiencing a ghost yourself or something paranormal, but to have this visiting a child I think is even more unsettling, because as a parent, I suppose you must feel, relatively helpless, because what can you do? So leave me your thoughts on this one. It's super scary, isn't it, to have picked this up on a baby monitor? Let me know what you think it could have been.
Imagine looking at your mother and knowing that she looks exactly like your mom, but you know in your soul that that is not your mother. Not a lookalike, not a clone, but an imposter. As impossible as this sounds, this is one of the most fascinating and most disturbing psychological disorders that has ever been documented, and it's called Capgras delusion. I have a master's in psych, and this is one of the most interesting things that I had ever learned about. And the reason that it's so disturbing is because the people who experience it don't fail to recognize their loved ones. They know that they're looking at their spouse or their child or their parent or their best friend. They see every detail perfectly, it's just that something inherently feels wrong. One patient reportedly described his wife by saying this: "She looks exactly like my wife, she sounds like my wife, but she isn't my wife." Currently, when you see a face that's familiar to you, two things happen. First, you will recognize a person's features like the nose, the eyes, the voice, the smile, but a second process always happens without you even feeling it, and that is familiarity. You get an emotional signal from looking at this face, knowing that this person is safe, this person's your friend, this person's your parent, this person is known. Researchers believe that in the people that are experiencing Capgras delusion, that emotional signal somehow gets disrupted. While that facial recognition is still there, that connection no longer is. And for some individuals, the explanation becomes, "This isn't my friend, someone's replaced them." And even though this is such a strange explanation, it's really just the brain trying to make sense of a broken signal. The first person to ever be described as having Capgras delusion was a patient by the name of Madame M. She was a French woman, and this occurred in the year 1923. And her case is honestly one of the creepiest, because she didn't just think one person had been replaced from her life. She believed that almost every single person in her life was a double. Her husband replaced, her daughters replaced, her neighbors definitely replaced. And for individuals who have passed away in her life, she felt like they were still living and that they had an imposter who was also a fake. Another case that's widely recognized as a part of this delusion is the man who thought that his wife was replaced with not just one wife, but with multiple wives. Like an imposter came in replacing his wife, and then another imposter came in replacing the first imposter. One of the most famous cases to ever come out of this involved a woman who became convinced that her husband was not only an imposter, but an extraterrestrial mimicking him. But where this gets even creepier to me is the connections to this delusion and folklore. All throughout medieval Europe, there are stories about fairies stealing children and replacing them with lookalikes called changelings. And changelings in European folklore is a supernatural being left in place of a human child, stolen by fairies, elves, or other spirits. Parents would insist that the child looked the same, the child sounded the same, but something was different and something felt wrong. Modern researchers have wondered whether some historical changeling accusations could have involved neurological or psychiatric conditions similar to Capgras. And there's actually a condition that's somehow even stranger, because the reverse is true. And instead of believing that loved ones are being replaced by strangers, the person believes that strangers are actually one person in disguise. So imagine seeing like a cashier, a neighbor, a police officer, and thinking that these are all one person just wearing different masks of other people. The human brain is capable of building realities that is just as convincing as the one that we're experiencing.
I thought the sticker on my windshield was just a prank until I realized that somebody was trying to get me to stay in the parking lot longer. So this happened last fall when I got off work, and when I got off work it was already dark outside. And I went to go walk out to my car, and I found one of those, it kind of looked like one of those vinyl peel-off stickers that are kind of hard to get off. And it was sitting like right in the middle of my car windshield, where you'd have to like, I'm short, so I'd have to like reach over and peel it off, and it would take me a sec. So my first immediate reaction was to go up and try to peel it off. But before I stood there and really tried, I remembered something that my dad always told me, and he told me that if something feels off, always go somewhere else safe and then figure it out. I ignored the sticker and I started to drive away, and I was going out of the parking lot, and I noticed that there was like a black SUV behind my car. Didn't think too much of it at first until they literally followed me for 7 straight minutes. And then that's when I did that little turn test I did for right turns, and they stayed behind me. So I called 911, I told them what was going on. They told me to drive to the nearest police station. So I did just that. I pulled up into the police station and the SUV took off. I tried giving the police officers everything that I could remember. There's only so much detail you can give about a black SUV though. And they did ask me, they said, did you like attempt to peel off the sticker? Did you touch the sticker? Asking me those questions just in case like it was laced with something, or I don't know, something along those lines. And I told them, no, I almost did, but I didn't. They said, that's good that you didn't touch it, because it definitely would have taken you a couple of minutes and you would have been standing outside of your car the entire time, which obviously is the whole reason that it was put there. I thought it was over after that. I was very wrong. I started to see this black SUV for the next couple of weeks in different parking lots, different stores that I would go to, just different locations. I even would go across town and I would see this black SUV. I know there's a lot of black SUVs out there, but I feel like my gut isn't wrong when it's telling me it's the same one that I saw before. Anyways, I started to change my routines. I started going places at different times than I usually would, like the grocery store. I did it on a different day than I was before. I changed some of my shifts for my work, that kind of a thing. And then about a month after that, I went to go get my oil change on my car. The mechanic called me into the garage and he showed me, he pointed like underneath my rear bumper, like towards this plastic panel thing, and it was a magnetic GPS tracker. The police were never able to find out who put it there or when it was put there. I'm pretty sure I have my suspicions of when it happened. I still check underneath my car every now and then. I may be a little bit paranoid now, but every time I go into a parking lot and I notice that somebody's sitting in their car or a car has been there for a long time, I do keep driving, or I'll go to the other side of the parking lot and park, because I'd rather feel dumb for overreacting than to be proved that I was right.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, you won't forget. Don't eat too much, cause you gotta stay fine, but come on, bestie, it's... Yeah! Hi, bestie boo, I missed you so much. What are you doing? You wanna go get your snack and your gardening essentials? Cause it's time. I'm dropping a new YouTube video today. So if you want to watch my stories in long form while you eat, go to the gym, whatever, make sure you head over to my YouTube and don't watch nobody else's, because they're making money off of me. So let's get right into it. For the sake of the story, let's call this girl Keisha. Now, Keisha had a problem. So Keisha lived her life pretty normally, right? And everything was pretty good, pretty normal, until one night she went to sleep like normal and she was having a regular dream. However, she got woken up with like a really loud scream, like, I got you, didn't I? Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much how it happened, right? She was having a regular dream and all of a sudden a big ass scream, and she woke up. And the scream sounded like it was coming from like where she was sleeping at. So when she woke up, of course, like she's scared out of her mind. Her heart is jumping. She's like, what the fuck? Who's screaming? What's happening? So she gets up, she checks on her little brothers and they're fine. She checks on her parents and they're fine. She looks outside and nothing seems to be going on. Also, this story is from Ecuador, so shout out to my Ecuadorians. So cool. She just chopped it up to, okay, I had a nightmare. That's cool. She went back to sleep and she slept regularly. And then the next night, the same thing happened. She's having a regular dream and here comes the scream and she wakes up. And so at that point, she speaks to her family about it. Like, did anybody hear a scream last night? Actually, the last 2 nights. And they're like, nope, no screaming here. If someone screamed, I would have woke up, but nah, cool. This happens for a 3rd, 4th, and 5th time. But by the 4th time, she started to realize a pattern. Every time the scream happens, it's at 3:07 a.m. exactly. And fast forward to about a week, this is consecutively happening every night. Now, this isn't funny for her because she's already dealing with grief. Let's backtrack a little bit. I just realized I called an Ecuadorian Keisha. Hey man. Keisha is a twin. Keisha had a twin sister. However, her twin sister passed away about a month ago. Now, here's the thing though. Her and her twin sister couldn't have been more different. She was like the good sister and she had the good grades and she tries to do the right things. But her twin sister was the complete opposite. She was the rebel. She would like steal, she would rob people. She loves her sister, don't get me wrong, but she was definitely involved with the wrong crowd. But that's still her twin, you know what I mean? Like, so of course, like her life was fine before all of this started, but she was dealing with grief. And so at this point, when this is happening like every single night, she's starting to put 2 and 2 together. It's Ecuador and they do some brujeria down there too. So at this point, she knows it's something spiritual. Now, at first, when the screams were happening, she didn't think it had anything to do with, her sister, because she would know her sister's voice screaming. That's her twin, However, her sister's birthday is March 7th. And if I told you before, she would wake up to the scream literally every night at 3:07. So it definitely crossed her mind that it could be. However, that's not her sister's voice. So boom, at this point, she decides to tell the entire family about it. This is what's happening to me. I'm hearing a scream at 3:07 every night. I think it's my sister. It could be my sister because of the 3:07 thing, but it sounds nothing like my sister. And this is clearly fucking with her, right? And so her parents decided to take her to church. Obviously, they're Catholic, so they decide to have the priest pray over her. They also decided to have the priest come to the house to pray over their house. So cool. One day, the priest comes, they pray over her, and the priest prays over the house, and a part of her is relieved because, this should fix everything. Except it didn't. The scream kept on for another week. It's to a point where she doesn't even want to go to sleep anymore. She's exhausted, she's tired, but she does not want to go to sleep because now she's torn. Is this my sister? And she's low-key kind of going crazy. So she goes to her grandma about it. And so she explains everything to her grandma that's happening, the screams, the time, the priest, it didn't work. And grandma is like, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it. For the next week, I need you to sleep over my house. You're going to stay here. And she's like, okay, great, grandma. I knew I had to come to you because her parents are more into church. Her grandma is more into fixing stuff, if you know what I mean. So she goes home, she gets, clothes, and she tells her parents, I'm staying at grandma's house for my mental health. And of course, they don't care. So she goes to her grandma's house and she sleeps perfectly fine. No scream or nothing. She stays there for a week. No screams, nothing. And so at that point, she's thinking grandma fixed everything, right? So she goes to grandma. She's like, hey, grandma, I think I'm going to go back home. Thank you so much for your help. It worked. Whatever you did, it worked. I'm going to go back home. And grandma look at her and she's like, I did do something, but it didn't help. I don't want to tell you too much, but what I am going to do is I am now going to your house and I'm spending a week at your house. And not only is grandma spending the week at her house, she's staying with her in her room. So boom, that's the plan, right? So grandma comes over, she comes over, nighttime comes, she goes to sleep, the scream happens. When the scream happens and she wakes up, grandma's already up staring at her. Grandma's already doing her stuff, and I ain't gonna tell y'all what she do because y'all like to try stuff. And so she wakes up, she's in tears, she's terrified, because she thought she got away from this. And she's looking at her grandma doing what she's doing, but there was something different this time. She's hearing somebody crying, and it sounds like it's coming from outside her window. So she goes outside her window, and she sees her twin sister. Her twin sister is in the neighbor's yard, kneeled in front of a tree, sobbing. Now, she didn't see her twin sister's face because her twin sister was bent down like this, crying. But she knew. She's like, that's my sister. So she turned around. She looked at grandma. She's like, that's my sister. That's my sister. And so grandma looks at her and she's like, you see her? And she's like, yes, I see my sister. She's right there under this tree. She's crying. You don't hear her? Grandma's like, no, I don't. And you say she's right there under that tree in your neighbor's yard? And she's like, yes. And she's in tears at this point also. And so grandma's like, interesting. Stay here. I'll be back. Stay here. So she's like, grandma, where are you going? Grandma said, I'll be back. And she's looking out the window. Grandma goes under that same tree that she told her. And she's still looking at her sister there crying. But grandma can't see her sister. So grandma goes under that tree, crosses over to the neighbor's yard, goes under that tree, and starts doing what she do. And as she's doing what she do, the neighbor comes out screaming, cussing grandma out. What the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck away from my yard. Da-da-da-da. And they also come out spiritually loaded. If you know, you know. So grandma not trying to hear that though. She's not fazed. So she started questioning the neighbor like, why the fuck is my dead granddaughter in your yard crying? And the neighbor replies and says to her, well, your dead granddaughter shouldn't have been sleeping with my man. And Keisha can hear this from her window. And so that's when she put 2 and 2 together. Before her twin sister passed away, she was telling her about how she was fucking with this new man, but she didn't want to tell her who it was because he had a wife. She not thinking it's the neighbors. And to top it all off, the twin passed away in her sleep. So she's standing there in shock and like everything is being put together in her head. And she immediately goes to her parents. I can't even talk. She runs to her parents like grandma's outside arguing with the neighbors. And her twin sister is still in that same position, kneeled down, crying. So long story short, twin was fucking with the neighbor's man. Neighbor's wife did not like that and took things upon, her hands. Basically, twin got and she's now a slave of the neighbors. If you know, you know. Now, grandma couldn't do it that same night, but now that she knows what she knows, she had to get a lot of backup to eventually free the sister. But yeah, y'all, that's the story. Don't forget to let me know what you were eating in the comments. And don't forget to go to my YouTube channel and watch my stories in long form. And don't forget to get your book. If you look at a few of my videos down, I got threats because of this book. Wifey, please come forward. I need your story, please. Anyway, I love you. Bye.
There's a good reason why people close their curtains at night in the Appalachian Mountains. There are things in those woods that are terrifying. And one of those things happened to be the Appalachian Wendigo. Now, there was this man named Jim. Jim decided one day that he was going to sell everything he had and buy some acreage of land in the Appalachian Mountains and start this homestead. So Jim finds this good piece of land and he moves there, builds a cabin and several structures. And for a year, his life was amazing. He said one day, though, he gets a knock on his cabin door. And he said he opens the door. On the other side of the door was this older gentleman. And he said the gentleman starts speaking. He said, "Hey, my name is Fox. I live not too far from here. And I wanted to check on you because I know you're all alone out here. And things can happen to people who are alone in the woods." And Jim was kind of like, why is this guy saying all this and stuff? So he said the guy continued to talk to him, but all he could think about was the fact that this guy, Fox, looked exactly like his father, who had passed away when he was a young boy. And he said it was just very, very eerie. It was like talking to his father. So he said, finally, the guy said, "You be safe out here. I'll see you later." And he said the way he said it was kind of creepy. So he said this guy, Fox, he just walked away and took off into the woods, and he never seen him again. A couple months after this, he said, one night, he was asleep in his bedroom and he awakes to this sound of scratching. And he said the scratching sounds were coming from his window. And he said when he looked over in the direction towards his window, he sees the shadow appear and it's almost in the shape of a person. And he said the shadow just moved across the wall all the way around him to the other side of his bed. And he said the next thing he knows, something was holding him down. He could not move and he was panicking and freaking out. And then he said all of a sudden, it was gone. And he got up and he said, that must have just been a really crazy dream. So he said, this kept happening to him. He kept having this, what he thought at the time was a dream. Well, one day he said he was out on his land setting up some traps. And he said he happened to notice in the snow, there was all of this weird movement. And he said, what is that in the snow? So he goes a little closer, he grabs a tree branch and he moves the snow over. And he said out popped several rats. And he said that's when he realized these rats were eating a deer carcass. And he said it was just so sickening that he had to start vomiting. And he said as he was bent over vomiting into the snow, he looks up and there is the guy Fox. And he said the guy was just standing there staring at him. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing out here on my property?" And he said Fox looked at him and said, "You seen the deer?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "You see, a lot of weird things happen in these woods." And then he said he turned and just walked away. So he said, that was like a really weird encounter. Like, did he have something to do with that deer or whatever? So he said, next couple of days, he really, really kept having these nightmares where he would see this shadowy thing in his room. And then he said this one particular night, he was sitting by the fireplace and he was just contemplating life. And he said, all of a sudden, the next thing he knows, he just stood up. He started walking towards the door. He opened the front door of the cabin and he starts walking out into the woods. And he said it was weird. It was like he knew what he was doing, but he couldn't control it. And something was just drawing him into the woods deeper and deeper. So he said finally he stops and he's just surrounded by trees. It's completely dark. And he said the next thing he knows, he hears his father's voice say, "Son, come here. It's your father." And he said out of the shadows steps that guy Fox again. And he said, "It's me. I'm your father. Come here. Come give your father a hug." And Jim's just kind of like, well, no, you're not my father. My father's not here anymore. And he's like, no, I am your father. Like, I've been here the whole time. Come give me a hug. And he said he just like didn't trust this guy. He thought he was crazy. And he said all of a sudden, this guy's skin began to peel off. And he said that's when he could see this wasn't his father. This wasn't a man. This was this pale, white, skinny creature with sharp teeth, sharp claws, and these bright yellow eyes. And he said this thing said to him, I said, come here now. And the voice had changed. So he said, next thing he knows, like he was able to get awareness again. And like he was aware of his situation where he was at. He turns and he just takes off running. He gets back to his cabin. He jumps in his truck and he leaves his cabin and just abandons it. And he said after a couple of weeks, he didn't know what to do. So he went to this Native American man in town that everyone said was a medicine man. And he told him like what had happened and stuff. And he said, this Native American man said to him, what you've seen was the Wendigo, what my people call the Wendigo. And he said, he has chosen you. And the reason he hasn't taken you yet is because he wants you to be as afraid as possible. Because to them, the more fear you have, the better you taste to them. And he will continue to follow you and, you know, harass you until he finally gets you afraid enough that he will take you. So Jim said he decided to sell the cabin and he never went back there again. And he said still to this day, he can hear scratching sometimes at his window and he will see the shadowy figure in his room at night. There's an old saying that you should always close your curtains at night because you can allow what's outside to be invited in. Now, this is a story from Eastern Tennessee. There was this man named Levi, and Levi said he lived in this house that was right next to the woods. And he said this particular night, he went to bed as usual, and he started having this dream. And he said in this dream, there was this man staring at him from his bedroom window. Said he had pale white skin, no nose, no mouth, and these solid black eyes. And on top of his head, he had a couple scraggly pieces of hair. And he said he was just looking at him in this dream. And then all of a sudden, he said he heard a voice say, come outside. And he wakes up, and he said right away he looked out his window, and sure enough, that man was standing outside of his window. And then he just took off into the woods. So he was kind of a little freaked out by that, but was like, you know, maybe I was just dreaming that still, you know, and it was all in my head. Until he looks at the window and he sees what looks like a face print. A couple weeks later, David said, you know, he goes to sleep, and this time he has a dream. He's in his house and he's walking into his kitchen. And he said when he looked out his back kitchen door, he could see this same man, creature, whatever you want to call it, outside on his back porch. And he said this thing was sort of bent over and it was pacing back and forth, just moving its shoulders. He said it then stopped at the door window and it turned and it looked at him and it said, come outside. And he said he woke up and he was like, man, that dream just felt like really real. So he walks out to his back porch and he looks, there's no one out there. But when he looks down at the snow on the porch, he can see what look like footprints. So David didn't know, Levi didn't know what to make of this. And he, at the time, just thought, you know, it was just bad nightmares he was having. So a couple weeks later after this, he goes to bed again one night. And he says he has this dream. And in this dream, once again, he's in his bedroom, laying in his bed. And he says he hears the front door open. And he said all of a sudden he heard footsteps kind of, you know, moving through the living room, down the hallway. And then his door opens. And he said in walks this white creature, bent over with its shoulders kind of moving as it walked. And he said he came right over to his bed and it sat on his stomach. And he said the whole time he just couldn't move. He said this thing just kind of was like smiling at him as it's sitting on top of him. And he said it turned and it looked at him and it said, I said, come outside. And then he said he lifted up his arm and it scratched him right on his side. He wakes up and it was like, you know, that seemed all too real. He lifts up his shirt and in the place where he got scratched in the dream, he had this huge scratch. And so the next day he goes to his neighbor's house and he's like, hey, you know, this is going to sound weird, but like, have you ever seen sort of like a weird guy that's been, you know, looking in windows or anything? And he said his neighbor just turned and had this like shocking look on his face. And he was like, you mean the pale white guy with, a couple strands of hair and the solid black eyes? And he's like, yeah, how did you know? And he goes, when I first moved here, I used to leave my curtains open and I would see him peeking in my window, and he would tell me to come outside. And he said, so after that, I started keeping my curtains closed at night. And so Levi said after he had heard that, he never slept at night without the curtains closed in his bedroom.
According to a follower that we're going to call E, she sent me this story, and she and her younger sister saw something staring into their house as children. And to this day, they still don't know what it was. And honestly, I don't know if I would have ever slept in that room ever again. Now, according to her, this happened when she was around 8 or 9 years old, and she was growing up in a quiet suburb of Oregon. And nothing strange had really ever happened there. There were no break-ins, no creepy neighbors, no local urban legends, just a normal neighborhood where kids rode bikes until dark, like many places in America or in the world. And one night, she and her younger sister decided to have one of their usual sister sleepovers in her sister's room at the end of the hallway. And she says that they stayed up late playing games that night until eventually her sister fell asleep. She was still awake playing on her iPad when she suddenly felt something that she had never felt before. And it wasn't fear, it wasn't a sense of panic that set in, just the overwhelming sensation that she was being watched by someone or something. And she looked over at her sister hoping for reassurance, but she was sound asleep, not even making a sound. And then she started hearing these noises come from outside, like these very heavy thudding noises, like something large was moving around the backyard. And at first it sounded like leaves that were, like rustling under your shoe. And then the patio furniture started shifting, and then branches began to snap. And she described it as sounding less like an animal and more like something that was curious and moving around, kind of like investigating. Like whatever it was looking for something in the yard. And she woke her sister up hoping that she'd say it was just a cat or maybe a raccoon, but instead her sister immediately went pale because she had heard it too, and it was actually something that the sister has heard many a times on other nights. The two girls peeked out the bedroom window and there was nothing. There was no movement, no animal, just complete darkness. But almost immediately they both felt it again, that horrible feeling that something outside knew that they were looking for it and that they had heard it. And being unable to sleep, they decided to sneak into the kitchen for some marshmallows, and as they walked down the hallway, the feeling seemed to disappear. It was only happening in the room at that time, and her younger sister climbed onto the counter searching for snacks while she walked toward the playroom. And the playroom was surrounded by these like massive like bayfront windows, and they were nearly 8 feet tall. And as she stepped toward it, she looked up and froze dead in her spot. Standing outside the window, looking directly at her, was a figure. It was too tall, too thin, and darker than the darkness that was around it. It was this body that was bent forward at an unnatural angle, she said. And it was almost like inquisitively looking at her, and it was near the top of the glass. And, there were two glowing red eyes staring directly down at her. It was looking directly at her. She yelled, and then behind her, she heard her sister yell out of fear too, because she saw it as well. They stood there motionless for what felt like an hour, but it was probably only a couple of seconds. And then both of them bolted back to their mother's room, absolutely terrified. And they were too scared to even scream at that point. And of course, they woke up their mom, telling her what happened, but the mother didn't believe them. And by the next morning, they discovered that the entire flower bed beneath those windows were completely torn apart. Dirt was smeared across the deck and across the fence and even splattered onto the windows and the side of the house where she saw this thing. Their mother assumed that they were responsible, and the mom made them clean it up the next day. But according to E, as they hosed everything down, both of the girls felt that same sensation again, like something was watching them from somewhere nearby. And the weeks Afterward, she said she continued hearing tapping noises on the outside of her bedroom window, little squeaks, little scratches here and there, maybe the outside patio furniture moving around, and almost as if something was still exploring the yard and trying to understand maybe the house a little better, trying to understand the layout of the home, or trying to understand them. And then eventually, after some time, it stopped. But she says it's one of her most vivid childhood memories that still terrifies her to this day. And now, years later, she refuses to look into the darkness in the backyard out those windows for too long. Because whatever she and her sister had saw that night never felt like an animal. She said it felt like something that was studying them and something that was very, very old and very, very dangerous. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you had anything like this happen to you.
My mom has this crazy ghost story, and I think about it often because it's so unexplainable. So, okay, she was with a group of friends, and they were at someone's house that had like an attic space, or like an attic room up top, but like they would never really go up in it, and her friend was like, oh yeah, it's haunted, whatever. And so they wanted to try an experiment that they had heard about, where you take a tape recorder, like a physical tape recorder, you sit up there and you ask questions, and then you just let the recorder record, and then you check it later. They sat in a circle and they asked questions. Who are you? Where are you? They came back later and were like, let's check the recorder. They pressed play, and it was just the group of people who had actually done the recorder experiment who were listening to it back together. They hear themselves asking the questions, and as they're asking like the initial questions, the recording sounds like this huge like surround of footsteps. So they were all like seated, right? And it sounded like there were just all like a big like crowd of people were like coming into the space. Like they could hear all these footsteps like coming around them. And they said, where are you? It was like they heard the crowd all kind of like whispering amongst themselves, but they couldn't make out like what they were saying, like as if they were discussing like how to respond. The sound of like a lot of people talking, but you can't make anything out. And then all of a sudden you hear one voice cry out above the others and say, we're home, we're home. And they used we're home. It gets even creepier. They were all like, whoa, what the fuck? And so they went, of course, and they were telling people like about it. The first person they tell, they go to play back the recording. Nothing. It's all, the entire recording sounds muffled and grainy, and you can't make anything out. But they all heard it that first time.
This story is a good reminder to be careful what you bring into your home. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. Give me a follow so you never miss a story. This experience was not a dream. The other week, I was going about my Saturday as usual when a heavy tiredness came over me. I'm not one who's ever been able to take naps, so it was very unusual when I began to feel my eyelids grow heavy. I fought it, but eventually ended up passing out on my bed. I woke up and couldn't tell if I was awake or not, but I had a horrible pain in my foot and couldn't move my body. When I opened my eyes, I could see a dark, hooded figure. I could feel its darkness and knew that it was something evil. So in my mind, I repeated the name Jesus over and over until the creature in an angry, stern voice said, "Stop." But I kept calling for Jesus. Then I woke up again. This time, I could feel something on the other side of the bed move. I turned my head and saw the figure of someone under the sheet. When I noticed it, the figure began to sit upright. Its top half just swiftly sat upright while still under the covers, and its head turned to me, still under the sheet. I screamed and grabbed a rosary, holding it tight while calling for Jesus again, and I woke up again. This time, I was able to get out of bed, and I ran outside of my house. That's when I noticed I was holding my rosary, which I didn't have when I first fell down and passed out. It hangs on the other side of my room from where the bed is. Then I felt a pain in my foot. I looked down, and it was swollen and red, but there was no evidence of any injury. It just hurt like it did in that weird dream state. Earlier that week, I had gone to a thrift store and found an antique handmade statue of an old woman. I thought it was cool that someone had clearly handmade it and decided to get it. but there had been a dark energy ever since I brought it into my home. After that experience, I went to look at the statue again and noticed it was missing half its left foot. My left foot was the one in pain. I ended up bringing it back to the antique store and returning it. The worker there asked, "Hey, can I ask you why you're returning it? It's just that you're the fourth person to return it, and every time people say they've had weird dreams of cloaked figures and pain in their left foot." My heart almost dropped out of my body. I told him everything, and he didn't even seem surprised. He said he was going to take it to a priest and maybe even burn it. He didn't even want it in his store at this point, and I don't blame him. From now on, I will be very careful what I decide to bring into my home.
Stephen and Helen were sitting in the family room with the window open when they began to hear a child humming outside and footsteps of someone playing in the rain. Stephen pressed his face to the screen, trying to see the child, but he couldn't see anyone there. He decides to say, "Do you want to come play?" Which...
It's not a smart move.
Why would you say that? Okay, no. There's no response, so he asks again, "Do you want to come play?" Silence. The humming and the footsteps stop too.
Risky little move.
Then Stephen and Helen hear a low, guttural growl ripping through the window from outside.
Holy fuck.
Stephen was shaking. He had never heard anything like it, and he decided to stay with Helen and Kelly for that night. Each time Stephen saw Helen from then on, she looked more and more tired.
Poor girl.
One day, she called Stephen and asked him to come over because something was growling at her inside the house and kept getting closer. Stephen hurried to the house and could smell a rotten, foul odor before even opening the front door. Helen said the growling started very softly and then just kept getting louder and closer.
Yuck.
Before she even finished her sentence, Stephen heard it. A loud animal-like growl coming from another room. Stephen was terrified, but he decided to go look in that room. There was nothing there. As Stephen turned around to return to Helen, the door to the basement opened behind him. Stephen slammed it shut and locked it, and then they heard the growl again from a different room this time.
Ugh.
Stephen went to that room and asked, "What do you want from us?" The growl came again and the basement door opened again. Stephen went back and shut it and locked it for a second time. The growl came again so loud it shook the room and they could hear movement from upstairs. Helen then tells Stephen that she has to show him something and she is visibly rattled. She rolls up her sleeve and reveals a large red and bruised bite mark. She didn't know how she got it, just that it had showed up in her sleep. I had something happen to me similar recently. Okay, but we don't have time to talk about it in this episode. So
Next one.
Stephen knew that they were running out of time and that he had to find help for Helen as soon as possible. That being said, Stephen and Helen did not have the easiest time finding help.
Oh, yeah.
Very
See why.
Yeah. Well, people are scared. Various different paranormal investigation groups would come to the house, all with different theories, explanations, and advice for Helen. None of the advice worked. Helen wound up with another bite mark on her arm, and Stephen described that the twinkle that had once been in this lovely lady's eye was no longer there. And, you know, the backstory of Helen's life that I told at the beginning of the episode is really just to showcase that this was like a really nice, like grandmotherly
This is a good woman. This house is doing her dirty.
This is when Stephen and Helen decide to gather people themselves and create their own group of investigators.
Over the past 6 months, I've gone from not believing in the supernatural to questioning just about everything I thought that I knew. If you're just finding my page, I wanted to give a quick update and some backstory about everything that's happened so far. About 6 months ago, I decided to look into the basement that smelled like an animal had died down there. We suspected a sewer line. That did not end up being the case. What they did find was a hole in the foundation wall. That is in another video to a friend that I actually took because it was weird at the moment, but I didn't really think twice about it. There's always been odd things that have happened since I've moved in here, but it's an old house. Things creak. I'm forgetful sometimes. There was always little things, but after that moment, that's when things started to escalate. At first it was small, things weren't where I left them. I'd catch things out of the corner of my eye. I'd hear things throughout the night. Honestly, I thought I was losing my mind. Until I started catching some of it on camera. I did buy a security camera to figure out what was happening. And what that has caught recently has only led to more questions. There's a lot of things that have happened off camera, but the ones that I have caught have kept me from spiraling because now I know it's not in my head and other people can see it too. You can probably tell I haven't been sleeping much. Anyway, the last incident was the basement door and the piano. Noises last night. I don't know anymore. I don't know. Ever leave this door open? And I just walked in here. I still don't know what any of this means. I'm just documenting it now for my own sanity, and maybe to show skeptics like me, who a year ago would have laughed at the idea of something like this happening to them. Come here. Come here.
Okay, so I feel one person, one male, about 34 years old, feels like they took their own life. I know you have to disclose if someone has passed in the home. It's possible they didn't pass in the home, so maybe that's why it wasn't disclosed. But the act was done there, and then they were brought to the hospital where they passed. This was a very tortured soul. This was someone who struggled with, it feels like schizophrenia. I feel like that's the word I'm hearing. This is someone who I don't feel anyone around them. They feel very isolated. They felt very alone. It feels like they tried multiple times to take their life, but there was one female who continually prevented, stopped, tried to intervene. This one female doesn't feel really like close, just it felt like she was there out of obligation almost. I'm not feeling like there was anyone in this man's family who was there for him. He feels like his whole life was very alone. The struggles with the voices in his head and the images he would see, the tricks his mind would play on him, just created this perfect opportunity for feeling like he was insane. When he took his life, he feels like he was 34. It's like I can see him throwing himself against the wall downstairs there in the basement. That may have been something he did when the voices would get too loud or the images were too vivid, because I see him throwing himself against the wall. Let's see if we can move him over. He feels a connection to the current homeowner, and he feels a connection to the homeowner's dog also. Really started to get the clarity and information via his dog, which is definitely not uncommon for the way that I work. He's feeling a connection to all of them. This is the first time he's actually felt like a part of something. And this doesn't mean that he should stay. It's just what I'm feeling from him. Let's see if we can move him over. For some reason, Gerald, the name Gerald or something like that comes to me. He's obviously very disoriented. He's been here a long time. I'm trying to get his attention. It's not easy. What I'm doing right now is just holding him down. So typically when I do these things, I have the homeowner present because more often than not, the homeowner needs to assist with passing them over. The reason for that is these situations occur as part of our evolution of understanding who we are as spiritual beings. It is part of our evolution as understanding who we are beyond the body, understanding that even when we're out of body, we're going through transitions, we're going through struggles, trying to understand the consciousness, which is who we are before we enter body. The consciousness carries all of our memory from past life, present, future lifetimes. And that consciousness goes with us no matter what body we take on. And so these things happen to us so we can grow and evolve as spiritual beings independently and as a group. That's the beauty of TikTok, is we can learn together. So I'm going to ask the homeowner to, when he feels comfortable, to sit down with his dog and connect to this gentleman. I feel like they may understand each other somehow. There's like something similar that the homeowner may be able to relate to this gentleman's suffering. Ultimately, I think he will be the one to calm him, make him feel seen and heard for the first time in his existence, and then allow his angels and ancestors to come in and take him. I don't feel it's my job to do that because I don't want to take away the experience for either one of them, and that would be overstepping my work.
About a month before my grandmother died, I saw something standing outside her bedroom door. Scary story time. Back in 2018, I worked late night shifts. Around the same time, my family was rebuilding our house, so we were temporarily living somewhere else. It was already an emotional time for us, and my grandfather had recently passed away. One night, I got home from work at around 4 a.m. The drive home was completely normal, but the second I stepped inside the house, something felt wrong, and the air felt incredibly heavy. It's hard to describe, but it was like the entire atmosphere had changed. I felt an overwhelming sense of pressure, almost like the house itself had become unnaturally still. I tried to brush it off as stress from work and started walking towards my room upstairs. Before going to bed, I always checked on my grandmother, who slept on the ground floor. As I turned towards her bedroom, an intense wave of fear hit me and every hair on the back of my neck stood up. Standing silently in her doorway was a figure. It had to be around 7 feet tall and was completely covered in a long black robe with a pointed hood. I couldn't make out a face. It wasn't moving or making a sound. It was just standing there watching. The moment I saw it, my instincts completely took over. I turned around and ran upstairs as fast as I could. A few moments later, I worked up the courage to look back towards my grandmother's room, and the figure was gone. I didn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't bring myself to close my eyes. About a month later, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. To this day, I have no explanation for what I saw standing outside her bedroom that night. I've never experienced anything like it before or since. And that's the end of the story. So do you really think OP saw the Grim Reaper, or is there another explanation for this? I'm not gonna lie, I think OP is a little sus for leaving Grandma alone downstairs. Like, I get it, you see something totally crazy and like very scary, like a tall hooded thing, but I would at least scream and like wake up the house to alert that something's going on. But that, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of like, dang, you really left Grandma alone, didn't you? But I mean, poor OP, like, we all can't really predict how we're gonna react in those situations. OP reacted on instinct, and their instinct was to, was flight. It wasn't fight, it was flight. And so they did, they thought what they did was best, and that's how they reacted. I could sit here and be a little judgy, but who knows, maybe I might be the same way if I were to ever be in that situation. But I would for sure wake up the household screaming that I saw something. So, but have you ever been in a situation like that? Have you ever seen the Grim Reaper or have any premonitions for something that would come to pass, sadly. Let me know your experiences. I'd love to read them in the comments. If you would like to send me your own spooky encounter, you could send it to my email in my bio. I'd love to read it. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Let me know.
You ever randomly just think about the time you almost died while out running errands? Me too. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. Yes, I'm having some kind of allergic reaction on my neck. Just don't look at it. You've probably heard of Bell Witch. Adams, Tennessee, that's where she's from. And that's where all of that went down. If you've never heard of the Bell Witch, she haunted the Bell family. She was this woman that like harassed them and did all the things. And then they ended up passing away. The dad did, I think. I don't know. There's a bunch of lore to it. But if you talk about her too much and say her name in a mirror or whatever, she'll show up and mess with you. I've got a whole other story about that. But anyway, you start there at the Bell Witch place, and that's where you go canoeing. So it was going to be me, my mom and dad, my brother, and then my extended family on my dad's side. All of the guys had been all day. The women were not, like none of the moms were, but we're in these canoes. We pull over to this little place. It takes like 8 hours to go down the Red River there or whatever. We pull over. We're all out like playing in the water and stuff. I had a life jacket on. I did have a life jacket on, but the water's running, you know, because it's a river. I don't know what happened. I ended up like getting pulled down and sucked under this tree that had fallen down, and the life jacket hung on the branch. So I'm face down in this water, stuck under the tree. I couldn't reach the bottom to get out, and I just remember like flailing. I remember just being like 11 thinking, oh my God, I'm drowning. When all of a sudden, after I'd been there for a while, like I struggled when I came up finally, but my uncle grabbed me by the back of the neck, jerked me up and said, hey, oh my gosh, you almost drowned. If I hadn't come over here to pee, you would have drowned. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about how my childhood went. So yeah, anybody else got stories like that?
My friend and I decided to go exploring one night. Our first stop was a very old and mostly abandoned cemetery at the very edge of our small town. We brought with us a Ouija board to see if anything would communicate with us, but we had no luck. However, as we were leaving the cemetery, my friend swore to me he felt like someone pushed him with a lot of force. Upon turning around though, there was nobody there. Afterward, we went to the top of a mountain that looked out over the town and some of the neighboring cities. It was at this point that my friend asked me to take a photo of him. So I did, and I've never felt more scared in my life. I used to work as an overnight security guard at a military school. People always said that the property used to be an old ranch, and according to the story, a young girl had been trampled to death by horses there many years ago, or at least, that's how I remember hearing it. I never believed any of the rumors. I assumed that they were just ghost stories passed around to scare new students. But everything changed one specific night that I was assigned guard duty. While I was making my rounds, I saw something that made me question whether those stories were really just legends. I live in North Georgia, and my house just so happens to be right off one of the most historic streets in the state. Early one morning, I was home alone, and I decided to go outside for a walk as the sun was coming up. As I was approaching my house to go inside, I saw something moving by the window. My immediate reaction was to take a photo in case I needed proof of somebody breaking into my house. But what I caught didn't look like a human being. And when I went back into my house to check if there was anyone in there, it was completely empty.
My story is about a strange mishap with my Alexa, which is basically Amazon's voice AI, kind of like a virtual assistant. A little brief background: my father has bought multiple Alexas and placed them throughout the house, including my room and the living room. The weird error, however, happened in the middle of the night. Everyone in the house was asleep, including me. But that quickly changed when I awoke from the sound of mumbling coming from outside my room, which is the living room. I was a little scared, but I figured it would just be my mom since sometimes she gets restless and watches TV if she can't sleep. But to my surprise, it was the Alexa playing a random song. Now, this has happened in the past, but only while I was awake because I can be a little loud. Normally, the one in my room would turn on since they only do it when you say the command Alexa. I shut it down by telling it to stop, but it creeped me out. I have no record of sleepwalking or anything, but I was too tired to care. The part that got to me was that I didn't know what set it off. The following morning, I asked my dad to check the app that controls all the Alexas in our home. He had programmed it to recognize our voices, but even the Alexa didn't know who it was. He can also play back a voice recording of who asked what and at what time. I told him about what happened the previous night. He thought it was just an error, but I insisted because I needed the reassurance. The recording was unclear, but you could tell it was a woman's voice, just mumbling something. I couldn't make out a single word, but the Alexa obviously was able to. The voice sent a cold chill down my spine. My mother joined in on listening and was just as creeped out as me. We all agreed that it sounded nothing like either of us. Maybe I did sleepwalk? I don't know, but it still makes me wonder if it was an entity trying to communicate something. The story is just another to add to the weird events that have happened in my house.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. For most of my life, I lived in an apartment with my parents. That apartment was perfect for us at the time, and nothing strange had ever happened there as far as the paranormal goes. But a few years after COVID, we moved into a home in Los Angeles. I was excited. The whole moving process was exciting, and I liked the idea of a fresh, new, clean home for some fresh, new starts. Our home was great. It was everything we needed, and it was comfortable and safe. For 2 years after we had moved into it, life was good. It was going exactly as we wanted it to. Then things slowly started changing. Not obviously at first. Nothing like shadows in the hallways or seeing apparitions. It just felt, I don't know, like our luck had run out almost. Like everything in the house that was once bright and amazing just slowly started rotting and going wrong. It started with our cars. At random times, we would find our windows cracked. Sometimes they would even be completely shattered. Other times, our tires would go suddenly flat without any explanation. We would brush it off. These things happen, right? Sometimes you get some unfortunate bad luck. When it rains, it pours, and all that. But it just kept happening. Again and again and again, over and over, 5 more times, we would find our vehicles like this. Every time we'd take the vehicles in to be inspected. Every time we'd asked what caused it. Every time we'd get the same answer. It was nothing. No obvious damage, anyway, no clear reason, no explanation. And then we noticed our dogs started acting differently. Every single night, right around midnight, they would start barking. And not their normal happy barks either. They were nervous, growling and whimpering. Like they were reacting to something that they could clearly see, but we couldn't. They started barking so often that we found ourselves starting to expect it. During all of this, our family began struggling in ways that we never had before. My parents' business started having problems, money became tight, and stress filled our home. It just felt like everything that could go wrong suddenly was. Even my mom started experiencing something she couldn't explain. For nearly a week, she kept having the exact same thought. It would pop into her head involuntarily and just nag at her over and over again. Throughout the days, across hours, this strong, persistent feeling that she needed to go to the coat closet near our front door. More specifically, that she needed to pull out an old water vacuum we owned.
which was weird because none of us had touched that old vacuum in almost a year. There was just absolutely no reason to think about it, no reason to need to move it. Honestly, no reason to even open that closet at all, but the feeling wouldn't leave her alone. She would later describe it as a nudge, a powerful feeling that she just needed to check. Eventually, the feeling became impossible for her to ignore, and one afternoon, while she was home alone, she finally gave in. She opened the closet, reached in, and pulled the vacuum out. And at first, everything was as she had expected it to be. She even felt a little silly for giving in. But then, she noticed something. There was something wedged behind the vacuum, something she hadn't seen before, and she said it looked purposefully placed. Like someone put it there, believing that no one would ever find it. She bent down to pick it up and immediately felt sick. The thing looked handmade, made from yarn, several different colors, maybe 8 or 9 in total, woven together. Mixed into it were clumps of material that looked disturbingly similar to real wool or animal fur. The strangest part was its shape. The larger piece had what looked like a face on it, 2 holes resembling eyes, and a curved shape resembling a frown, and attached to the main piece were 2 smaller yarn figures. My mom just stared at it, trying to figure out what she was looking at. The longer she looked at it, the longer she held it, the worse she began feeling. Later, when my brother and I got home, we saw it. We had the exact same reaction to it, and we somehow all felt like the object represented our family. The larger figure looked like a parent. The smaller pieces looked like children. Now, my mom isn't the type of person who jumps to paranormal conclusions. She's extremely religious, practical, and grounded. She's never been interested in stories about curses or witchcraft, yet the moment she saw the object, her mind immediately went there. And that scared us more than the object itself, because if she was concerned, then we definitely had to be. Over the next few weeks, she asked questions, tried to figure out where it came from, tried to figure out if someone could have placed it there. There were people in our lives who had shown jealousy toward my parents before, people who didn't always wish us well, and while we couldn't prove anything, that possibility lingered. At one point, my mom considered having a priest bless the house, but before she could, a family friend suggested something different. They told her to take the object to running water, pray over it, throw it into the river, and leave without looking back. According to them, the river water would carry away whatever negativity was attached to it, and looking back could allow it to follow you home. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but after everything we'd experienced, my family wasn't eager to take any chances. Just when we thought things couldn't get any more strange, one afternoon, our Ring camera alerted us that someone was at our door. A woman none of us had ever seen was standing there. My dad answered the door, and she explained that she'd been living in her car after an argument with her husband. And somehow the conversation turned to her bringing up our neighbor, a man we barely knew. But according to her, her husband knew things about him, rumors and stories, things involving his late wife. She claimed that after his wife died, he'd become involved in witchcraft. This was all so strange because, of course, we'd never seen her before. She didn't know about what we were experiencing and what we'd had found, and what we were thinking was happening to us. But still, almost completely out of nowhere, she was standing on our door, talking about the things that we had been going through and discussing. Could it all have been connected? The bad luck, the barking dogs, the hidden object, even the woman at our door. To this day, we just still don't know.
This happened to me in Michoacán, Mexico. It was my first time visiting my mom's ranch in Mexico, and I was staying alone in one of her houses. When you walk through the gate of the property, my mom's house is on one side, and my uncle's house is nearby. My mom's house is usually empty because she can't visit often. Most of the time, it just sits there vacant. I remember the first day I landed. That night, there was fiestas happening in my rancho. Every year in December, the town throws small parties with music, food, and people everywhere. My cousins were busy working at their taqueria, selling tacos during the fiesta, and most of the family had either gone to work or were out enjoying the celebration. At one point during the night, I realized I had forgotten my sweater at my mom's house. The house was close by, and I didn't want to bother my cousin who was still working, so I decided to walk back by myself to grab it. But as I started walking toward the house, I noticed something that made everything feel even creepier. Both my mom's house and my uncle's house were completely empty. Everyone had gone to the fiesta. The lights were off and the area was dark and quiet. The music from the fiesta could barely be heard in the distance, and I was walking there completely alone. As I got closer to my mom's house, I started feeling uneasy, like something wasn't right. Then I stepped inside. The moment I walked in, the uneasy feeling got even heavier. The house felt strangely quiet, like the air itself was thick. I started looking around for my sweater, trying to ignore the feeling. That's when I suddenly heard a knocking noise coming from somewhere in the house. I froze for a moment, listening, but I tried to ignore it and kept looking for my sweater, telling myself it was probably nothing. Even though I acted like it didn't bother me, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was there. About 5 minutes later, my cousins suddenly came running to the house, looking nervous. They asked me, "Why did you leave by yourself? Why did you come here alone?" I told them I had just come to grab my sweater. They looked at each other and said, "Why didn't you tell us? One of us could have walked with you." Then I asked them something that made the moment even stranger. "Were you guys knocking right now?" They both looked confused and said no. They had just left the taqueria and came straight over to check on me. That's when the uneasy feeling in my chest got even stronger. From the very first day I stepped inside that house, something about it always felt wrong. The air felt heavy, like the house was holding onto something.
Hey y'all. So this is Last Thread Before Bed, episode 26. This is a little series where I read scary stories from Reddit before I go to bed, and my ass tries not to get nightmares. So boom, let's get into it. So tonight's story is on subreddit Ghost Stories. This is where I've been finding all of the really good ones, y'all. I try to stick to paranormal and kind of stray away more from just the scary experiences, and I want more paranormal experiences. So from the looks of this story, this is like a being watched kind of story. As a disclaimer, I do not fully read any of the stories that I do on this series. I'll glimpse over them, but I do not know how any of these stories end, so let's get into it. So this story is from user puzzleheaded-amount4. I got a story for y'all. You guys tell me if you think it was paranormal or not. About 2 years ago, my girlfriend and I had our 3-year anniversary. We had a great dinner in downtown LA. She had a little surprise for me after. She rented a pool in the Hollywood Hills for us through this app called Swimply. I never heard of this app, nor would I ever think to rent out a pool in someone's backyard. Just not my thing, but my girlfriend was excited about it and thought I'd be romantic. To be honest though, I really wasn't feeling it. My dog's having zoomies, y'all. I didn't want to do it. She paid a decent amount for it though, and I didn't want to be a buzzkill. My intuition told me as we started our drive to the Hollywood Hills, this isn't a good idea, multiple times. I had a gut feeling that going up to this house in the Hollywood Hills was just not a good idea. Also, she had this reservation through Swimply from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. We got out of dinner around 8:30, so we were gonna get to this house late. We get to the house, park, and it's just so dark and quiet up those hills. Didn't see a car pass by us once we got to the hills. Didn't really see anyone out walking, though it is nighttime. In order to get into the backyard, you need a code. We had a code and we were told that we'd have the backyard to ourselves for 2 hours with no other company. The first thing that weirded me out slightly is that the gate was already open. No code was needed, which was odd to me. We get into the backyard and there's a jacuzzi and a pool. The pool has a tarp on it though, so we didn't get into it. It was a very cold night in Los Angeles too, so we sat in the jacuzzi. I had a very weird feeling when I walked into the backyard, one that I can only describe as vertigo. I look into the house a little bit from the backyard and see a couple of lights on, but it's pretty dark. Couldn't tell if anyone was home or not. After a couple minutes though, I got that feeling where if you keep on looking into the house, you may see something you don't want to see. I fucking hate that feeling. We didn't have any music or anything, just the cold wind, the loud slap of the tarp going against the pool, and a wind chime going above us in the jacuzzi. It's about 9:15, and I finally tell my girlfriend it's time to go. I don't like the vibe here. Maybe I was paranoid, but as soon as I said that, she said, yeah, I agree, let's go. That made me feel even more nervous because I could tell she felt the same creepiness I felt. We go to the back of the backyard where the bathroom is and change. At this point, I'm trying to get out of this backyard and get to the house as fast as possible. As my girlfriend heads to the gate and I follow, I feel the hairs on the back of my neck raise, as if someone was looking/following me. Everything I'm about to say happens in under 30 seconds. Her and I are heading to the gate, and I'm obviously avoiding looking into the house because I'm creeped out. Her and I both notice a camera that was pointed directly at us when we were in the jacuzzi. And then right when we were about to open the gate, my girlfriend says, oh shit. I pick her up and we get the hell out of there. Now, I believe in something. I don't know if it's ghosts, but I believe in something other than us that's out there. My girlfriend doesn't do ghost talk. It freaks her out. Ask my girlfriend when we get into the car, why did you yell? What happened? She seemed really upset and told me she didn't want to talk about it. She ends up telling me later that night that she saw somebody, looking at us through the house windows right when we left the gate. But she couldn't describe what she truly saw. She said it was just staring at us though. Still gives me the chills to this day, but honestly, could have just been a creep. Let me know y'all's thoughts. I honestly don't know if that was a person or not because they already had a camera watching them, so why, on top of that, is there a person there? I don't know, y'all. That sounds a little too much for me. That sounds to me like they saw the apparition of somebody inside that house. Maybe someone who used to live there and had passed away. Or maybe it was some creepy ass motherfucker, who knows, y'all. That was it for tonight though. Y'all follow me for more scary stories. Good night.
Before you marry into a family, you need to do your research properly because I didn't and I nearly lost my life. What my husband's family did would shock you. So you need to listen to the end. Story time. So I met my husband online. I had my online business. It was a side hustle and he made this massive purchase. This was my first time, having someone make that purchase that big. I was super excited. And ever since, I would get a few purchases here and there from him. Sometimes it would be a bulk purchase and I was super happy. And then he decided to send me a message one day. He said he would like to meet me in person because we need to do a business deal. I agreed. I was happy. He came, I gave him the directions where to find my shop. He came over and, we went for a lunch, not date, but we went for lunch. We discussed about the business, everything. And ever since, we've been business partners. And then he proposed to me. He said he wanted to be in a relationship with me because he's single and his family are putting pressure on him to get married. I was single at the time and I wasn't really looking. But when he said that, he seems like a decent guy. In a way, I accepted. Then we started dating. Shortly after that, he proposed. I was super happy. And then he said, there's no point waiting for years before getting married. I agreed with him. So we soon tied a knot. I was happy. I have never actually been to his village. So after a couple of years of marriage, at this point, we've got children together. His business wasn't doing too well. Mine was flourishing. Bearing in mind, this is my side hustle and I've got my own job on top of that. Fast forward, I started noticing that things like in my side hustle wasn't going on well. Then my actual 9-to-5 job, also, I started experiencing difficulties. People were lying on me. There were so many things that were happening that I just couldn't understand why and this is happening and where this is coming from. I started to pray. I started to fast. I was taking this very serious because I felt like some spiritual attack on my life, on my business as well, to the point that my children were falling very ill. It would be like, every month, 2 months, I'll have to take one of my children to hospital. Anyway, my husband told me out of the blue that we needed to go to his village because he had lost a relative and we all needed to be there. He said the children didn't need to come with us, so we can actually leave them with my family members and then we would travel to the village. I wanted to support my husband, so I didn't have anything against that. So we did that. When we got there, they gave me a list of rules, things that I should do and things that I'm not allowed to do. I found that a little bit odd. And I remember one
might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Morning, I woke up to go to the toilet. And in the villages, not all houses have got toilets in the house. You have to go outside and use it. After doing my business, on my way back to the house, I bump into this old lady. She called me and she said there's something she needed to tell me. I was wondering, I don't know this lady, but what could it be that she wants to tell me? Anyway, out of respect, I went. She told me that I do not know the family I have married into, and she's telling me to be very, very careful and to open my eyes wide, be vigilant, pay attention to my surroundings, the things that are happening. She said I shouldn't eat anyhow. She said I shouldn't never ever gift anyone my own money. She said even that person, if they insist that it's money that I must give, I shouldn't even give them anything, no gift, just to tell them that I haven't got. She also told me that I should be mindful of food that they give me. If that food is not cooked by me, I should never ever eat it. She told me a bunch of things that, I was scared that I've even forgotten most of them. But she also told me to never ever let anyone hear of what she's told me, not even my own husband. So I kept quiet. I thanked her and I went my way. Ever since that day, I've never set eyes on this woman. So one day, my husband, the whole of his family said they needed to go somewhere, the next village, to do something. And before they get back, they want me to have dinner ready. They didn't leave me the food items, and I thought I could just find stuff in the kitchen or in the house. When they left, I did the cleaning, I did the washing, and then I started to get ready to cook. I went in to my mother-in-law's room because in the kitchen, there was nothing there. So I started going through the baskets and stuff to try and find any food items so that I could cook dinner. But then I noticed this small box in the corner which caught my eye. I don't know what made me go near it. I don't know what made me even open that box, but I did. I noticed in that box, it had a list of names. Each name had a red thread wrapped around it. At first, I didn't really want to touch it, but I was going through the list of names. Some of the names were names of our own children. Then I stumbled across my own name, even my date of birth written on that piece of paper. I took the thread off. I took the thread off my children's, robe and everything. Then I just took the whole thing out of the box and put the box back in its place without my names or my children's names in the box. I didn't say anything. As soon as we returned back, I noticed a difference in my business. Everything was doing 10 times better. Also, I noticed that our children weren't falling as sick as they were before. So I started to realize that that piece of paper that I saw in that box was something that was done with our names. Hence the reason why they were in there. And untying them, obviously, released whatever it was that was done on us. I still never mentioned this to my husband because I still remember the old woman's advice. Fast forward, I heard the news from my husband. I was sat next to him when the phone call came in and they said sadly his mum had passed away. We had to rush back to the village again. When we arrived there, the rest of the children were trying to get the mum's stuff ready. I noticed something very strange. I had gifted her stuff. I'm talking about a piece of clothing. I used to also send her money as well. But those clothing had unusual markings on them. I didn't know what the hell she did with the gift that I gave her. Soon after, all my problems, when she passed away, all our problems were solved. Even my own husband's businesses were starting to flourish again. But guys, I'm telling you, before you marry into a family, you need to do your research properly. Do not go in marriage blindsided. Do not go in thinking that love is everything. Please do your research properly. So this is my story to warn young ladies out there, or even any woman of any age, to be careful. Please do your research properly before you go into a marriage.